Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. Now I've had my new lathe and lathe stand set up for quite some time now, and I'm just thrilled with how they're working for me. One of my favorite things to do is to come out into the shop and just chuck something up in the lathe and turn it. It's just really relaxing. Now the one problem that I have with this setup is I don't have a good place to store all of my turning tools. I have been keeping them inside this cabinet, and then one by one as I need them I pull them out and they all end up just spread across this open surface. And that's just no good. Don't like it at all, so I need something better. Now I've seen a lot of other people make a rack that they put in this space right here, but what I don't like about that is having to reach over the workpiece while it's spinning to get each and every tool. So it seems like a little bit of a safety risk. Now on top of that, I'm also planning on putting a rail system up here so that I can actually mount a camera and move it back and forth a little bit so I can get really good footage of the workpiece. So my solution is this right here. This little fold-up cabinet. Open the buckle, fold it down, and you have all your lathe tools right there. So while I'm working here, they're still a little bit out of reach, so I decided I had to add an extra feature where that table slides out. So now I have everything I need within arm's reach when I need it, and it's really easy to put away and be done with it when I don't need it. So let's check out how I made it. I started out by cutting a large sheet of 1/2-inch MDF to size. This will be the platform that I base the whole project off of. Next I cut the frame and drawer pieces down to size. I didn't want to buy any lumber for this project, so I'm just using whatever scraps I can find from older projects. I left one of the frame pieces a bit wider than the rest so it could act as a kickstand. You'll see what I mean by that a little later. Then, I ran that wider piece in the main backboard through the router table to make a channel that will house the piano hinge. This way, these two pieces will be able to make full contact with each other once assembled. Starting with the backer board, I mark and pre-drill the screw locations, then attach the hinge. With that secured, I line up the wide frame piece and attach that as well. Here you can see how the piano hinge hides inside that channel, allowing the two pieces to lay flat against each other. Next, I drilled a few pilot holes and ran in some screws to finish assembling the frame. This isn't necessarily the strongest construction style, but there really won't be that much weight involved, so this will be just fine. And it was fast. I cut a bottom for the frame out of 1/2-inch plywood and screwed it in place. Since the frame doesn't get a front piece, this bottom adds a considerable amount of strength. Here you can see how leaving the back part of the frame wider allows it to act as sort of a kickstand for the folding shelf. Next, I place the drawer pieces and slides inside the frame and mark out their locations. I drilled some pocket holes and used them to join the sides of the drawer to the drawer face. I used the router table again to make a rabbet for the drawer bottom. There is no back piece to the drawer, so I attached a temporary scrap piece in order to make the rabbeting process a little easier. I test fit the bottom to make sure it fit correctly. Notice that the router bit left rounded corners. I chose to also round the corners of the bottom, rather than using a chisel to square the corners of the rabbet. I put wood glue in the rabbet, then used pin nails to lock everything down while the glue dried. If this drawer had to hold a bunch of weight, this wouldn't be the best method, but since it only has to hold about a dozen lathe tools, it will be plenty strong enough. After lining the drawer slides up with the very front of the frame, I secure them in place with several screws. I use these plastic washers to hold the drawer up off the bottom by just a little bit so that it wouldn't rub while in use. Then, I pulled the drawer slides out and clamped them against the drawer front. That washer in between is just the right thickness to get the two pieces of the slide to line up correctly. I run a screw into the first exposed hole, then pull the drawer out a little at a time, adding screws to the holes as they become visible. I did this going as far down the slide as possible on both sides. Then I had to remove the drawer to get the screws into the furthest back holes. So I'm going to mount this whole contraption to this wall over here so that it's next to the lathe, and all I'll have to do is reach to my side and I'll be able to get at my tools. One challenge I've got with this is this piece of conduit that's running along this wall, and rather than trying to fight with making this pass through the thing that I'm building. I just mounted a couple of 2x4 cutoffs parallel to each other on the horizontal studs that are in my wall. Now I just need to take my whole folding contraption and mount it to these two boards. And then there's just going to be that little gap in the back where that conduit's going to be able to run. Pre-measuring and pre-drilling holes was the only way I was able to get this thing hung up by myself. With one screw in, I made sure that the whole thing was level before driving in the rest of the screws. So, that's the idea anyway. Fold it up into the wall. I'll have to come up with some kind of a latch mechanism to keep it closed off here, which should be pretty easy. Then when you need your tools, let it fold down, slide it out. That way, as I'm over here turning on stuff, I can have them right close to me and I can just set them back in their spot and pick them back up, and should be pretty slick. I like it. I had a bunch of really thin walnut laying around not doing much, so I decided to give it a job keeping my tools organized. I gave both sides of one edge a radius, then ripped that edge off at the table saw. Then I bundled those strips together so I could cut them to the exact same length using my crosscut sled. I set up a stop block on the sled and cut one of the strips into a bunch of short pieces to use in between the longer strips. I cut a 2-inch spacer, then proceeded to use CA glue and activator to glue the dividing strips into the drawer. I managed to get my spacer stuck on the very first try, but with a little persuasion, I got it back out without breaking it. To keep that from happening again, I grabbed a chunk of paraffin wax and rubbed it all over the edge that might come into contact with the glue. After that, I didn't have any more trouble. After all the long strips were glued down, I added the short pieces to act as stops, and in some cases, cradles for various turning tools. My thinking behind using CA glue is that it is obviously fast, but also strong enough to do what I need, while still offering me the option of removing it without much damage should my needs change. So there we have it. I did add a chain on the side just to sort of offset some of the weight of it, since it does come way out here and adds a little bit of cantilevered weight against that one little kickstand in the back. So I think with that chain it's going to hold up just fine. The only other issue that I'm trying to overcome is when it's perfectly flat against the wall, half of these want to tip against this and then they spill out when I unfold it. So I'm toying with the idea of maybe some magnets for now. I've just got a piece of elastic cord that I've hooked from side to side, and that seems to keep it in place 90% of the time. Something still slips out once in a while, but the concept is solid. I just have to fine-tune the retention system and we are good to go. This is a whole lot better than keeping junk in the drawers here. So anyway, thanks for checking it out. I hope you enjoyed it. Go ahead and give me a like or a subscribe if you feel like it, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.